Thank you, Madam Chair.
She has an obligation to explain why she directly contradicted what she wrote in her report. She says in her report, the Bureau of Prisons' claimed penological interest is in protecting female prisoners from sexual violence and trauma. She just told you the Bureau of Prisons didn't say there was a concern about sexual violence and trauma. Those are directly contradictory, and why are you contradicting what you wrote in your report?
And what are you trying to hide? No, wait, point of order.
Senator
Padilla.
Are you going to let her answer that question?
Senator
or you
Padilla.
don't want her to answer that question?
Senator Padilla.
You're
Very much,
a cover-up,
Madam
Senator
afraid
Padilla.
of the answer to
This
that
is
question?
no cover-up.
Are
Senator
you afraid
Padilla.
of the answer to that question?
Senator Padilla.
So yes, you are afraid of the answer to that question.
Senator Padilla.
Clearly, you're afraid of the answer to that question.
Hello, Patriots. Welcome back to Signal 76, the only channel dedicated to upholding the timeless values that made this nation great. Today, we are diving deep into a truly disturbing case, a prime example of how radical ideologies are infiltrating our institutions and threatening the very fabric of our society. We're going to dissect a contentious Judiciary Committee hearing that reveals a judge's decision regarding the placement of a transgender inmate. A decision that, frankly, should outrage every single American who believes in common sense and the safety of our citizens. Before we get into this critical analysis, I need you, my fellow patriots, to do 3 crucial things right now. Smash that like button if you stand for truth and safety. Subscribe to Signal 76 so you never miss our unwavering defense of traditional principles. And drop a comment below letting me know your thoughts on this insanity. Watch until the very end, because we're going to unpack the layers of this case and expose the dangerous agenda at play. We are the front line in this cultural battle, and your engagement fuels our fight.
The government did not move for a stay of the decision.
Well, Judge Netburn, I'm going to continue on this line of questioning. In your court, what matters more, the rights of individuals or your political ideology?
I apply the law to the facts.
I asked a question, which matters more?
Well, my political ideology doesn't matter at all.
Okay, so I don't believe you. And I think this case demonstrates that you are willing to subjugate the rights of individuals to satisfy your political ideology. This case involves a male defendant who raped a 9-year-old boy. Was he guilty of that?
Yes, the petitioner pled guilty to that.
Okay, so he raped a 9-year-old boy. He also raped a 17-year-old girl. Was he guilty of that?
He pled guilty. The petitioner pled guilty to that crime as well.
So was he guilty?
I hope so, because she pled guilty to it.
He was a he when he did this.
That's correct.
And also criminal deviant conduct, which the record doesn't disclose what that was exactly. Then, after serving in prison, Mr. McLean was released for parole, but then violated the terms of parole by having internet and was sent back to prison. 1 year after being released again, he was convicted of having child pornography. Is that correct?
I'm unclear on exactly the time frame that you're at, but the petitioner was convicted of distributing child pornography.
Child pornography that was images of adults violently raping children.
Abhorrent conduct.
Okay.
For which there are real victims.
And this individual, 6'2", biologically a man. A minute ago you said that when this man decided that he was a she, you said this individual was, quote, I wrote it down, sober and entirely a female. That phrase struck me as remarkable. Did this individual have male genitalia?
I think what I said, or at least what
that is a verbatim quote, entirely a female.
Sorry, what I meant to say was hormonally a female.
Okay, but that's not entirely. Did this individual have male genitalia?
Yes.
So you took a 6'2" serial rapist, serial child rapist with male genitalia, and he said, you know, I'd like to be in a women's prison. And your answer was, that sounds great to me. Let me ask you something. The other women in that prison, do they have any rights?
Is that a question you're asking me?
Yes, the other women in that prison, do they have any rights?
Of course.
Do they have the right not to have a 6'2" man who is a repeat serial rapist put in as their cellmate?
Senator Cruz, I considered the facts presented to me, and I reached a decision based on what the law
I asked you a question. Do they have a right not to have a 6'2" man who is a serial rapist put in as their cellmate? Do those women have a right to that?
Every person who's incarcerated has the right to be safe in their space.
But you didn't think so. You didn't think so. And in fact, I'm going to give some quotes from your order because Senator Kennedy is right. This is not a judge's order. This is a political activist. By the way, the beginning of your order says, at birth, people are typically assigned a gender. I got to say that would astonish a lot of Americans. A lot of Americans think you go to the hospital, a baby is born, and congratulations, you have a little boy, a little girl. The assigned a gender, I know you went to Brown, but it sounds like it's in a college faculty lounge with no bearing on reality. The Bureau of Prison argued what I'm saying right now, that if you put this person in a female prison, there will be a risk of sexual assault to the women. And you know what you did? You said you didn't care about the women. I'm going to quote what you wrote. You wrote, quote, "The Bureau of Prisons claim penological interest in protecting female prisoners from sexual violence and trauma. This interest is legitimate," that's kind of you to say, "but there are no signs that petitioner is at risk of reoffending. The record is devoid of evidence of incidents of violence or assault during petitioner's incarceration when she was the perpetrator, only the victim. A theoretical risk of sexual assault by the prisoner without more cannot support the BOP's position. No evidence, theoretical." Have you dealt, in what universe is someone who is a serial repeat child rapist not at a risk of reoffending?
Senator, as I do in every case.
Okay, I know you've been told to repeat the line, "I follow the law." I asked a question. In what universe is someone who is a serial repeat child rapist not at risk of reoffending?
Sir, I looked at the facts that were before me in this case. All of the evidence, including the statements of every warden who had supervised this petitioner.
You also wrote, "The BOP also posits that permitting petitioner to live among women will be traumatizing and possibly dangerous to them. This concern is overblown." I have to say, if I were the father of one of those women, and you decided that my daughter's cellmate was going to be a 6'2" man who over and over and over again committed violent sexual assault, I would say the entire justice system is absurd, and it is clear on your record your political ideology matters a heck of a lot more than the rights of those women that you endangered. I think you're a radical, and I think you have no business being a judge.
Judge Netburn, there was an opportunity during your exchange with Senator Cruz that you were attempting to offer a response relative to the conditions under which this petitioner was unsafe in the facilities in which she was being held. I'd like to offer you the opportunity to finish that response.
So the facts that were presented to me and what I relied on to make my decision were that the petitioner had engaged in no violence, no physical violence, no acts of sexual violence whatsoever while in custody. All three wardens who supervised the petitioner requested that she be transferred to a women's facility because of her serious medical needs. In addition, the Bureau of Prisons' longtime medical provider testified at a 2-day hearing in my courtroom and recommended that the petitioner be transferred because of her serious medical needs. And the last thing I'll say is that the Transgender Executive Council, which is the body that makes decisions on behalf of transgender transfer requests within the Bureau of Prisons, never said that the petitioner could not be transferred, and never, ever said that she couldn't be transferred because of any risk of violence. What the Transgender Executive Council repeatedly said in denying the request was simply that she needed to maintain her hormone levels. That was the repeated justification for the denial of transfer. But the petitioner had reached full female hormone levels before even being incarcerated. At the time, the district judge in Indiana who sentenced the petitioner requested that she be placed in a women's facility. Her hormones were entirely female at that point, and so the decision by the Transgender Executive Council to deny the transfer request based on this idea that it was only because her hormones needed to be consistent and stabilized, I found was a pretext, but they never once said she cannot be transferred because of violence. It was always based on this idea that her hormones had to be.
Thank you, Judge Netburn. Senator
Judge Netburn,
Padilla.
that's
Senator
directly contrary to what your
Senator, you
report
all
said.
have
That is
had
direct-
no.
We're going to be
No, there is no
and that's how it
no,
works.
there is not.
That is
There
exactly
is-
how it works.
Look,
If you follow up, you didn't get extra time, and she just directly contradicted her own report. I'm just going to read her own words.
I'm just sitting
because
fair,
it's
Madam
exactly
Chair.
the opposite of what she said. Your own report.
Senators,
said,
I gave both of you more time to finish your line
allowed
of
the witness to
questioning.
testify
I
and
allowed the
introduce
witness
facts.
to
You
finish
jumped in
her.
another round.
I allowed
You
the
took
witness
another
to
round.
finish
You
her
opened the
response.
door- you
I
opened the
allowed
door
the
to this.
witness to finish
You're
her
abusing
response.
your status
That is,
chair.
Hey, I understand
That
that you're
is not-
scared of the
You are
facts.
abusing
I
your
have-
status
Madam
as chair.
Senator
Madam Chair,
Padilla?
Madam Chair,
Open
Thank you,
up
Madam Chair.
testimony and then
she
not
has an
give us a
obligation
chance
to explain
cross-examine.
why she directly contradicted what she wrote in her report. She says in her report, the Bureau of Prisons' claimed penological interest is in protecting female prisoners from sexual violence and trauma. She just told you the Bureau of Prisons didn't say there was a concern about sexual violence and trauma. Those are directly contradictory, and why are you contradicting what you wrote in your report?
And what are you
Madam
trying to
Chair, I
hide,
believe
Madam
I have
Chair?
the floor.
No, wait, point of
I
order.
believe
Senator
I
Padilla.
have the floor.
Senator
Trying to
Padilla.
hide,
Are you going to let her
Madam
answer that question?
Senator
or you
Padilla.
don't want her to answer that question?
Senator
You're
Padilla.
afraid?
This
Very
is
much,
a
Madam
cover-up,
Chair.
Madam
Senator
Chair.
Are you
Padilla.
afraid of the answer to
This is
that?
no
cover-up.
Are
Senator
you afraid
Padilla.
of the answer to that question?
Senator Padilla.
So yes,
My
you are
time.
afraid of the answer to that question.
Senator Padilla.
Please hold
Clearly,
my
you're
time.
afraid of the answer to that question.
This is
Thank you.
absurd.
Two of the nominees before us, appreciate your patience and your dignity.
Now, let's talk about this hearing. What we witnessed was Senator Cruz grilling a Judge Netburn over a decision that defies logic and jeopardizes the well-being of vulnerable women. This wasn't some minor bureaucratic oversight. This was a deliberate choice to prioritize a radical social agenda over the fundamental right to safety and security. The case in question involved a male defendant, a biological male standing at 6 feet 2 inches who committed heinous crimes. The rape of a 9-year-old boy and a 17-year-old girl, followed by convictions for distributing child pornography. Let that sink in for a moment. We are talking about a sexual predator, a danger to society, and yet this judge referred to this individual as entirely a female and approved their transfer to a women's prison. As right-wing patriots, we believe in biological reality. We understand the fundamental differences between men and women, differences that are not merely social constructs, but are rooted in our very DNA. To disregard these fundamental truths is not only scientifically inaccurate, but also opens the door to dangerous consequences. Senator Cruz rightly challenged Judge Netburn on whether individual rights or political ideology held more sway in her courtroom. And frankly, the evidence presented strongly suggests that this judge allowed a radical political ideology to completely overshadow the rights and safety of the women incarcerated in that facility. Think about the sheer injustice of this situation. Innocent women serving their sentences are now forced to share a prison with a biological male, a convicted serial rapist. Where's the consideration for their safety? Where's the acknowledgement of the trauma they may have already endured? Senator Cruz powerfully asked if these women have a right not to have a 6 feet 2 inches serial rapist as their cellmate. The answer should be a resounding yes. But this judge, blinded by an extremist worldview, apparently saw no issue in placing these vulnerable women at such grave risk. The audacity of this decision is further highlighted by the fact that the Bureau of Prisons itself argued against this transfer, citing the very real risk of sexual assault against the female inmates. But Judge Netburn dismissed these legitimate concerns as theoretical and overblown. Theoretical? Overblown? What will it take for these radical ideologues to understand the potential for harm they are creating? Do we need to wait for a tragedy to occur before they recognize the dangerous path they are on? Senator Cruz also rightly took issue with the judge's detached and frankly absurd statement that at birth people are typically assigned a gender. This kind of language, divorced from biological reality, is a hallmark of the radical left's attempt to redefine fundamental truths. As patriots, we stand firm on the understanding that gender is not assigned. It is a biological reality determined at conception. To deny this is to deny science and to undermine the very foundations of our understanding of the world. The judge attempted to justify her decision by stating that the inmate had not been violent while in custody and that the wardens and the BOP's medical provider recommended the transfer due to serious medical needs related to maintaining hormone levels. However, Senator Cruz astutely pointed out that the Transgender Executive Council within the BOP initially denied the transfer requests, not because of violence risk, but precisely because of the hormone maintenance issue, a reason the judge herself later dismissed as a pretext. This clear contradiction in the judge's own statements raises serious questions about her motivations and the veracity of her justifications. This entire episode is a stark reminder of the dangers of activist judges who prioritize a radical social agenda over the rule of law and the safety of our citizens. These individuals are not upholding justice. They are imposing their ideological beliefs from the bench with potentially devastating consequences. As right-wing patriots, we must stand united against this kind of judicial overreach. We must demand that our judges uphold the Constitution and prioritize the safety and well-being of all Americans, not just a select few pushing a radical agenda. This isn't just about one case. It's about a larger battle for the soul of our nation. It's about defending traditional values against the onslaught of woke ideology. It's about ensuring that our institutions serve the people and uphold common sense, not cater to the whims of a radical minority. We, the patriots of Signal 76, will continue to shine a light on these injustices and fight for the principles that have always made America strong. So, share this video far and wide. Let your friends, your family, and your fellow patriots know what is happening in our judicial system. We need to wake up those who are still asleep and unite in defense of our values. Remember to like this video, subscribe to Signal 76 for more hard-hitting truths, and leave your comments below. Your voice matters. Together, we can push back against this dangerous tide and restore sanity to our nation. Stay vigilant, patriots, and never back down.